I saved the family hotel, but they pushed me aside. I never thought that at 47 I would be standing in the lobby of my family's hotel, fighting for recognition in the very place I had spent my life saving. But here I was. Right in front of me was a large sign announcing tonight's important meeting. A meeting I was supposed to lead. Instead, my parents had made a different decision. A decision that, when I heard it, left me completely stunned. "Lucy, your father and I have thought this through. And we've decided to give the hotel's management to Brian." I blinked, unable to believe what I had just heard. My heart pounded as if someone had just ripped away everything I had poured my sweat, tears, and money into. Brian, my younger brother, who had never worked a serious day in his life, who only showed up here when he needed money or wanted to feel important, was now the one chosen to lead? I am Lucy Evans, a hospitality management expert with nearly 20 years of experience. I once managed a luxury hotel chain in Seattle, where I spent my youth climbing the corporate ladder. I loved my job, the precision of it, the satisfaction of providing guests with a perfect experience. But 8 months ago, I gave it all up to return home and save my family's hotel, Maplewood Inn, from the brink of bankruptcy. This hotel was not just a building or a business to me. It was my childhood. It was where I grew up, where I sat at the front desk watching my mother check reservations, where I followed my father around learning how to fix a leaking pipe. I loved this hotel as if it were a part of me. But Brian, he never cared. While I dedicated my youth to studying hospitality management, he jumped from one major to another: graphic design, real estate, and finally, nothing. He drifted around the city, dabbling in half-baked business ventures, then abandoning them halfway. Yet when my father called me 8 months ago, his voice filled with panic, saying that Maplewood Inn was about to collapse, I didn't think twice. I sold my condo in Seattle, withdrew my entire savings, and returned home to Montana to save the hotel. And I did. When I came back, the hotel looked like a relic of the past. Outdated interiors, an old reservation system, and patchy service. The reviews on travel websites were filled with 1-star ratings and disappointed comments. I dove into work immediately. I revamped the entire management system, improved customer service, and partnered with travel bloggers to promote the hotel. I worked 16-hour days, without weekends off. Every penny I earned went into the hotel. New carpets, upgraded rooms, improved restaurant menus. In just 6 months, the hotel was alive again. Online ratings soared, bookings doubled, and for the first time in years, revenue turned a profit. And now, after everything, my parents were telling me I wasn't the right person to lead? Brian stood next to my mother, arms crossed, with a smug half-smile on his face. "Don't get so worked up, Lucy," he said arrogantly. "Someone still has to handle the day-to-day details, and you're great at that. But this hotel needs a bigger vision. And that's where I come in." I laughed, not because any of this was funny, but because I was trying to hold back my rage. My parents looked at me as if I were an overreacting child. "You're too rational, Lucy," my mother said softly, as if trying to soothe me. "You're great at operations, but leading a hotel isn't just about numbers. You need to trust your instincts, and Brian has that." I looked at them, then around at the hotel, the place I had poured my heart and soul into saving. And I realized one thing. To them, I had never been the first choice. 8 months ago, when I first stepped into the main lobby of Maplewood Inn, I barely recognized it. A hotel that was once the pride of our family now looked like an abandoned building. The carpets were frayed, the old sofas smelled of mildew, and the ceiling lights flickered as if ready to die out at any moment. The front desk was still using an outdated reservation system from over a decade ago, and the staff looked unmotivated, moving sluggishly through their shifts. I remember gripping the front desk, taking a deep breath, and telling myself, "I can fix this, I will save this hotel." And I got to work. The first thing I tackled was the most obvious issue: the reservation system and the interiors. I knew that if Maplewood Inn wanted to survive in this competitive market, we had to modernize. I spent most of my savings replacing the outdated reservation system with a modern software that integrated with online booking platforms like Expedia and Booking.com. I personally trained the staff to ensure they fully understood the new process. Next, I renovated the main lobby. I hired a local team to install new carpets, repaint the walls with warm, inviting tones, and replace the old furniture with stylish yet cozy pieces. I collaborated with local artists to display Montana landscape paintings, giving Maplewood Inn a unique regional identity. These changes weren't easy or quick. Some nights I slept in my office, staying up late to check every detail, from the fabric of the bedsheets to the lighting in the rooms. I worked 16-hour days, grabbing quick meals in between renovation plans. But I didn't complain. I knew I was doing the right thing. The hotel staff initially looked at me with skepticism. They were used to the old ways, where laziness and carelessness had become the norm. But I refused to let that continue. I organized customer service training sessions, insisting that staff greet guests with genuine smiles instead of robotic greetings. I taught them how to solve problems rather than passing them off. Some of the longtime employees resisted, but I didn't back down. Those who refused to adapt, I let go. Those who stayed gradually realized that I wasn't just another family member, I was a real leader. One employee who stood out was Maria, the head of housekeeping, who had worked here for over 15 years. At first she was wary of me, but when she saw my dedication and genuine care for the hotel, she became one of my strongest allies. "You really want to change this place?" Maria told me one afternoon during a break. "It's been a long time since someone actually cared about Maplewood Inn." I smiled. "Because I believe this place deserves another chance." Beyond renovating the interiors and training the staff, I focused on rebranding Maplewood Inn. I worked with travel bloggers, inviting them to experience the new and improved hotel and write reviews. I invested in a professional website where guests could easily book rooms and see the best features of the hotel. I partnered with local tour companies to list Maplewood Inn as a prime lodging option in Montana. Within just 3 months, the results were undeniable. Bookings increased by 40%, and for the first time in years, the hotel became profitable again. The negative reviews were replaced by glowing recommendations. Excellent customer service, friendly and attentive staff. The newly designed rooms are so cozy, it feels like a luxury resort. Delicious breakfast, and I love that they use local ingredients. I had proven that Maplewood Inn could not only recover, but also compete with other hotels in the area. I did all of this without Brian, my brother, who only showed up a few days a month, spouting grand ideas before disappearing again. And yet, now that the hotel had finally turned around, my parents were telling me I wasn't fit to lead. As I stood there, listening to them announce Brian as the new head, it felt like a punch to the chest. Were they really so blind that they couldn't see everything I had done? But there was one thing I knew for sure. I had worked a miracle once, and I could do it again. But this time, I wouldn't do it for them. I sat silently in my office, the warm yellow light casting a glow on the wall where I had hung charts tracking Maplewood Inn's growth. The numbers spoke for themselves. Soaring profits, record-high bookings, and customer ratings better than ever. But now? All my efforts meant nothing because of a decision I had never even been consulted on. Brian, my younger brother, had just been appointed to lead the hotel. What angered me wasn't just being pushed aside, it was the realization that my parents had never intended to give me control in the first place. Even after I had sold my condo, left behind a stable career in Seattle, and spent nearly a year saving the hotel, they still didn't see me as worthy. Maybe it would have been easier to accept if Brian were actually competent. But he wasn't. He had never managed a business for more than 3 months. He bounced from one venture to another, throwing money at ridiculous ideas before abandoning them. And yet, here he was, strolling into the hotel with a smug expression, as if he had won a competition I didn't even know I was in. "Relax, Lucy." Brian patted my shoulder, his tone the same one you'd use to calm a child. "You'll still be the one running things day to day. I'll handle the big picture, and you can focus on the little details. I clenched my jaw. Little details? Did he even realize that those so-called little details were what saved this hotel from bankruptcy? Did he know that I had spent countless nights sitting with Maria, planning every aspect of housekeeping, reading every customer review to find areas for improvement? No, he didn't. And he didn't care. After that meeting, I went to talk to my parents. I didn't yell or cry. I just wanted a reasonable explanation. You need to understand, Lucy, my mother said, her voice gentle but firm. Brian has a bigger vision. He's going to take this hotel to the next level. A vision? I let out a bitter laugh. The only vision Brian had was turning the hotel lobby into a bar, transforming Maplewood Inn from a peaceful retreat into a party hub. Do you really believe he can run this hotel? I asked, trying to keep my composure. I did everything to save this place. If it weren't for me, Maplewood Inn would have been repossessed by the bank months ago. My father sat silently, staring into his coffee as if it could shield him from this conversation. My mother shook her head, as if she was trying to get me to understand something obvious. You're incredible, Lucy, but you're too rigid. A hotel isn't just about numbers, it's about atmosphere, about branding. And Brian has that instinct. I laughed. Unbelievable. So what am I, a bookkeeping robot? No one answered. And their silence hurt more than any words ever could. I walked out of the meeting room, feeling betrayed by the very people who should have valued me the most. As I passed through the hallway, I saw Maria standing there, her eyes filled with concern. She had heard everything. Are you okay? Maria asked softly. I wanted to say I was fine, that this didn't bother me. But I couldn't lie to myself. No, Maria, I sighed. But I will be. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking. I had done everything possible to prove my worth, yet to them, I was still nothing more than a shadow behind Brian. And I knew that if I stayed, if I kept trying to make them see my value, I would only keep hurting myself. I had saved Maplewood Inn once. But if they couldn't appreciate what I had done, maybe it was time to put my energy into something entirely new. Not for them, for myself and my own future. I didn't leave Maplewood Inn right away. A part of me still wanted to see if my parents would realize their mistake. But as the days passed, I saw that they wouldn't. Brian took over with an air of arrogance, treating everything I had built as nothing more than a stepping stone for his vision. He started making terrible decisions, cutting maintenance costs, removing key amenities and turning the hotel into more of a party venue than a high-end retreat. The staff was confused, guests started complaining, but my parents remained blind to it all, convinced Brian would succeed. I knew I couldn't stay any longer. I realized it one afternoon when I took a drive just to clear my head. As I wound my way through the outskirts of town, I suddenly stopped in front of an old but promising building. Silver Creek Lodge. It had once been a well-known hotel in the area, but over the years, it had fallen into decline. The previous owner couldn't compete with newer establishments and eventually put it up for sale. But its location was perfect, right near the ski slopes, with breathtaking views of the Rockies. If renovated properly, it could become one of the top luxury lodges in the region. I sat in my car, staring at the for sale sign in front of the building. And at that moment, I knew exactly what I needed to do. I had revived Maplewood Inn from ruins, but my family didn't appreciate it. So why not do it for myself? Right then and there, I called an old friend, Jake Carter, a real estate expert I had worked with in the hospitality industry. I asked him about Silver Creek Lodge, and within an hour, I had a meeting scheduled with the owner for the next day. I didn't tell my family about my plans. I knew they would only try to stop me or worse, mock me. With my remaining savings and a bank loan, I purchased Silver Creek Lodge within a month. Signing the contract felt like the biggest relief of my life. No more being tied down by my parents, no more seeking their validation. This was my chance to build something entirely my own. I got to work immediately. Silver Creek Lodge needed a massive overhaul from plumbing to interior design. But I didn't feel overwhelmed or exhausted. For the first time in years, I was working for myself. I called Maria, the former head of housekeeping at Maplewood Inn, and asked if she wanted to join me. She didn't hesitate for long. "I'm sick of the way Brian runs that place," Maria said. "I want to work for someone who actually knows what they're doing." Before long, other staff members left Maplewood Inn to join me. They had seen firsthand who the real leader was, and they trusted me. I renamed the hotel Summit Lodge, a name that symbolized more than just the mountain peaks. It represented the pinnacle of my journey. I was no longer working to gain my family's approval. I was working to build my own future. News of my purchase of Silver Creek Lodge spread quickly throughout town. Some people supported me, while others gossiped that I was trying to destroy my own family. And then, just as I expected, my parents found out. My mother called the moment the news broke. Her voice was filled with irritation. "Lucy, what are you doing? Opening a competing hotel against your own family?" I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. "It's not competition, Mom," I replied calmly. "I'm just doing what's right for myself." "You're betraying the family," she shouted. I let out a quiet laugh. How ironic, considering they were the ones who betrayed me first. "If that's what you think, then so be it," I said and hung up. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty for standing up for myself. Summit Lodge wasn't just a hotel. It was a symbol of my freedom. Of everything I had learned after years of trying to earn the approval of people who never truly valued me. I had once saved a hotel for my family. Now, I would build an empire for myself. Rumors about my departure from Maplewood Inn and the opening of Summit Lodge spread even faster than I had anticipated. Some in town called me a traitor to my family, while others looked at me with admiration. But no matter what they thought, I didn't care. I focused on my work. While my new team and I poured all our energy into renovating Summit Lodge, I kept an eye on Maplewood Inn from a distance. And I wasn't surprised to see it rapidly declining. Within just 3 months of my departure, Brian had destroyed almost everything I had built. He thought he was smarter than me, that he had a big vision, but the reality was, he had no plan at all. Other than cutting costs and making reckless decisions. He eliminated the complimentary breakfast, which had been a major selling point for the hotel, leading to a significant drop in returning guests. He fired Maria, the longtime head of housekeeping, claiming she was inflexible with scheduling. He then hired a new staff at lower wages, but the result was a flood of complaints about poor cleanliness and sloppy service. He slashed maintenance expenses, leading to a broken hot water system in the middle of winter that took over a week to fix. The outcome? A wave of negative reviews on travel sites, angry guests, and a sharp decline in bookings. I heard all of this from my former employees, the ones who had left Maplewood Inn to work with me at Summit Lodge. They told me Brian frequently showed up late, rarely involved himself in the hotel's operations, but had plenty of time to throw extravagant parties with his friends in the lobby. Every time I heard updates about Maplewood Inn, I just shook my head. I didn't take pleasure in watching it crumble, after all it had once been my home. But I didn't feel guilty either. This was the inevitable result of putting an unqualified person in charge. What was once a rapidly recovering hotel under my management was now spiraling downward. Travel site ratings plummeted. Loyal guests never returned. Revenue took a severe hit. Then, in the 5th month after I left, the biggest news broke. The bank had issued a foreclosure warning on Maplewood Inn's loan. I could almost picture my parents' panic when they received the letter. They had never truly understood how to run a business. When I was there, I carefully managed the finances, reinvesting profits to ensure long-term stability. But Brian was different. He spent recklessly, pouring money into things that didn't add value, and when the real problems hit, he had no plan to fix them. I knew just how desperate my parents were when, one morning, my phone rang. My mother's name lit up on the screen. I didn't answer right away. I let it ring until it stopped, then sat there, staring at my phone in silence. I knew what they wanted. They wanted me to come back and clean up the mess they had made. But I wasn't the same Lucy anymore. I wasn't their fixer. A few hours later, my mother left a voicemail. "Lucy, I know you're upset. But the hotel is in trouble. Brian needs you. We need you. Please call me back." I smirked. When they needed me, I was Lucy, the one who could save the hotel. When they didn't, I was just the overly rational, rigid daughter. I let the silence stretch for days. Then, my father called. His tone was more serious, wearier. "Lucy, I won't beat around the bush. The bank is going to foreclose on the loan if we don't find a solution. Brian can't handle it. Can you help?" I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. No apology, no admission of their mistake. They just wanted me back to save them. Just like before. But this time, I wouldn't. I picked up my phone and called him back. He answered immediately. "I'm not coming back," I said firmly. "But if you need advice, I can give you the names of some hotel consultants who might be able to help." A long silence followed. Then, he sighed. "I see." I didn't know if he truly understood. But it didn't matter anymore. I was on my own path now. And this time, I would build something greater than my family ever had. 3 days after my father's call, I received a text from my mother. It wasn't long or desperate like the previous messages. This time, she simply wrote, "Lucy, come to dinner with us. We need to talk as a family." I hesitated. Part of me knew this wasn't just an invitation. But, in the end, I decided to go. Not because I believed they had changed, but because I wanted to look them in the eye and finally say what I had been holding back for years. I arrived at my parents' house at 7 p.m. The moment I stepped inside, I could feel the tension in the air. The dinner table was set, but no one seemed to have the appetite to eat. My mother was the first to speak. "Lucy, I know the past few months haven't been easy for you. But we're family. And family is supposed to help each other." I set down my fork and knife and looked directly at her. "You're right, but when I needed recognition, did you help me?" She froze. I continued, my voice calm but firm. "I saved Maplewood Inn. I did everything to keep it from going under. But instead of acknowledging that, you and Dad handed it over to Brian, the one person who had never taken anything seriously in his life. And now that it's falling apart, you want me back?" My father cleared his throat, maybe in an attempt to break the tension. "Lucy, your father and I may have underestimated you. But this hotel is our family's legacy. We can't let it go." I let out a dry laugh. "Really? When I was there, you didn't worry about its future. But now? When it's on the brink of collapse, you suddenly want me to step in and save it?" My mother placed her hands on the table, her eyes pleading. "We can fix this, Lucy. You just need to come back and do what you do best. Help Brian understand how to run the hotel. Think about the family legacy, sweetheart." I took a deep breath. No. Just one word, but it landed like a slap across the room. My mother's eyes widened as if she couldn't believe what she had just heard. "Lucy, you can't say that." "I absolutely can," I replied, my voice calm but firm. "I did it once, and you didn't appreciate it. Now that the hotel is falling apart under Brian's poor leadership, I won't come back to clean up his mess." My father leaned back in his chair and sighed. "So you're really going to let Maplewood Inn fall into the bank's hands?" I raised an eyebrow. "I'm not the one letting it go. Brian and you did that. And I'm not responsible for it." Silence filled the room. Finally I spoke again. "If you truly want to save the hotel, I can recommend some hospitality consultants. But I won't come back. This is no longer my problem." My mother looked at me as if she didn't recognize me anymore. "You've really changed, Lucy." I smiled faintly. "No, Mom. I've just learned to put myself above everyone else's expectations." That night, I walked out of my parents' house without guilt or regret. For the first time in my life, I had drawn a clear boundary. I had spent my whole life seeking my parents' approval, trying to prove I was worthy. But now, I realized, I didn't need their validation anymore. I had Summit Lodge, a hotel I had built with my own hands, where every brick, every detail carried my mark. I had a team of incredible employees who believed in me and stood by my side. I had forged my own path, and I had no regrets. They could call me heartless, they could say I was cold, but I didn't care. For the first time in my life, I felt truly free, and I was no longer wasting my efforts on people who didn't deserve them. Less than a year after I left Maplewood Inn and started my own journey, Summit Lodge became one of the fastest-growing boutique hotels in the region. We weren't just surviving, we were thriving. With a dedicated team and a clear vision, Summit Lodge quickly achieved record-breaking occupancy rates. We were highly rated by travel bloggers, featured in prestigious hospitality magazines, and praised by loyal guests. Meanwhile, Maplewood Inn was sinking. Under Bryant's management, the hotel continued to struggle. After I refused to return, my parents were forced to hire a hospitality consultant, something they should have done from the start. But it was too late. The hotel's reputation had suffered too much damage, and no matter what they did, they couldn't restore it to its former glory. I didn't feel triumphant over Maplewood Inn's downfall, I only felt pity. Pity that they had a chance to save it but threw it away because of their pride and favoritism. Then one day I received an email from the National Hotel Association. Summit Lodge had been nominated for Boutique Hotel of the Year, a prestigious award given to the best independent hotel in the region. I couldn't believe my eyes. The project I had poured my heart and soul into, the dream I had built from the ground up, was now being recognized on a national stage. As I stood on that stage accepting the award, looking out at a room filled with business leaders, industry experts, and journalists, I felt an overwhelming sense of fulfillment. I had done it. Without my parents' help, without their approval, I had risen on my own. And then, I saw them. My parents sat in the far back row. They didn't congratulate me, they didn't approach me. But their eyes said it all. They understood. They understood that I didn't need them to succeed. They understood that they had lost a true leader because of their own biases. They understood that they had been wrong. But I didn't need an apology. I didn't need them to admit it out loud. Their silence was the clearest acknowledgement of all. That night, I didn't go looking for them. I didn't need an awkward conversation or a late apology. Instead, I celebrated with my team. The people who had believed in me from the very beginning, the ones who stood by me through every hardship to achieve this success. I had once craved my parents' approval, desperate to be recognized. But now, I realized I had never truly needed it. I was no longer living in the shadow of Maplewood Inn. I was standing at the summit of my own success, and that was all that mattered. That night, after the celebration ended, I returned to my hotel room, standing by the window, gazing at the city lights. I had achieved everything I wanted: success, freedom, and most importantly, the self-education I had once sought from my family. But deep inside, there was still something unfinished. Maybe I still had a connection to Maplewood Inn. Maybe, despite everything my family had done, I couldn't completely turn my back on them. 2 days after the award ceremony, I drove back to town and stopped by Maplewood Inn. It was no longer the bustling place it used to be. The lobby was empty, the front desk lacked energy, and there were only a few scattered guests. I could see the signs of decline. The withered plants at the entrance, the worn-out chairs in the lobby. Inside the office, my parents and Brian sat with worried expressions, staring at financial reports. When I stepped in, they looked up, startled, as if they couldn't believe their eyes. "Lucy." My mother was the first to speak, her voice hesitant. I looked around, taking a deep breath. "I'll help," I said. "But this time, I do it my way. No favoritism, no irrational decisions. If this family wants to save Maplewood Inn, you have to accept that I will be the one in charge." All three of them stared at me in shock. Brian started to speak, but my father raised a hand to stop him. He looked at me for a long moment, then slowly nodded. "We need you, Lucy." My mother reached for my hand, her eyes glistening. Thank you, sweetheart. For the first time in years, I felt like they truly respected my decision. I didn't waste any time getting to work. With the experience I had gained from Summit Lodge, I knew exactly what needed to be done to bring Maplewood Inn back to its former glory. I restructured the staff, brought back the best employees, improved customer service, and invested in strategic marketing. This time Brian, no longer as arrogant as before, sat down, listened and learned from his past mistakes. My parents no longer interfered in business decisions. They let me work freely, and over time, they learned to trust me. 3 months later, Maplewood Inn began to recover. Bookings increased, positive reviews slowly reappeared on travel websites, and the hotel regained its energy and charm. One afternoon, while I was checking the lobby, my mother approached me and gently placed her hand on my shoulder. "Lucy, I'm sorry." I turned to look at her. "For not believing in you, for not seeing what you've done for this family." I was silent for a moment, then smiled softly. "I used to be angry at you. But now, I understand that sometimes, people only realize the value of something when they nearly lose it." She squeezed my hand, and for the first time in years, I felt truly close to her. After Maplewood Inn stabilized, I continued managing both hotels, Summit Lodge and Maplewood Inn. Each had its own unique style, but both carried my mark. Brian finally learned what it meant to truly work. He was no longer the irresponsible younger brother, but was becoming a reliable business partner. My family, despite all the hurt and misunderstandings, slowly found its way back together. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I truly had it all: success, freedom, and a family I once thought I had lost. Lucy's story is not just about rebuilding a hotel, it's about reclaiming her self-worth. It reflects a truth that many of us face: that sometimes the people closest to us fail to see our efforts and talents until we step out of their shadow and succeed on our own. Lucy proved that recognition doesn't come from pleasing others, but from staying true to oneself. In the end, she not only secured her rightful place, but also held on to the family she thought she had lost. What do you think about Lucy's journey? Have you ever found yourself in a similar situation, overlooked and undervalued despite giving your all? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to follow the channel for more inspiring stories about life and family.